The mornings in my house had a rhythm as steady as the ticking of the wall clock above the stove. 6:30 meant coffee. Always coffee. I'd sit at the oak table I bought with my late wife nearly 30 years ago, breathing in the bitter steam, letting silence wrap around me like an old blanket. The kitchen walls were lined with photographs, snapshots of birthdays, vacations, graduations, but my eyes always found their way back to one picture. My daughter Rachel, at 12 years old, holding up her first spelling bee trophy. Her smile was wide, her cheeks flushed, her eyes so full of pride that I swore they glowed brighter than the trophy itself. To me, she would always be that girl. The one who clutched my hand in crowded fairs, who cried when her goldfish died, who promised me at 16 that she'd make me proud. And she had. At least, that's what I believed with every sip of morning coffee, with every glance at that framed memory. My Rachel wasn't just my daughter. She was my pride, my proof that I had done one thing right in this long, complicated life. So when the first whispers about her reached my ears, I didn't let them in. Not for a second. Before I tell you what I eventually saw with my own eyes, let me ask you this. If you enjoy these kinds of true, emotional stories, please subscribe to Voices of Uncle Jay and hit that like button. It helps this channel grow, and it tells me to keep bringing you more stories every day. Rachel still came by on Sundays. That had always been our ritual. She'd push open the front door with her elbow, juggling a paper bag from the bakery down the street. "Morning, Dad," she'd call, her voice warm but thinner than I remembered. I'd already have 2 mugs on the table, one black for me, one with cream for her, the way she liked it since college. For years, these mornings were our anchor, proof that no matter how busy life got, Rachel and I still had each other. But lately the air felt different. She still brought the bread, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. She sat across from me, breaking off small pieces of bread she never ate. When I told old family stories, the ones that used to make her laugh until tears streamed down her face, she gave me a polite smile instead. The sparkle was gone, as if her mind was somewhere far from my kitchen. Her phone was the loudest guest in the room. It buzzed over and over, and she'd flip it face down with quick hands. "Who's that?" I asked once, trying to sound casual. She smiled too quickly. "Just work." "Work? On a Sunday?" I teased, though my gut twisted. "Deadlines don't take days off," she said, but her voice carried no joy, only a practiced calm. I wanted to press her, to say, "Talk to me, Rachel. Tell me what's happening." But love, especially a father's love, sometimes disguises itself as silence. I told myself not to pry. She was grown, independent, successful. And besides, hadn't I always believed she was stronger than she looked? That night, long after she left, I stood by the mantel and stared at the photograph of her holding that spelling bee trophy. 12 years old, proud and unstoppable. I whispered to the empty room, "She's fine. Rachel's fine." But deep down, in the place fathers don't admit to anyone, I already knew something was wrong. I just didn't want to face it yet. It started small, like a crack in glass you barely notice until the light hits it just right. I was at the grocery store reaching for a carton of milk when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Mrs. Hanley, an old neighbor who never lost her taste for gossip, leaned on her cart and gave me that look people wear when they think they know something you don't. "Jay," she said, lowering her voice, "I don't mean to pry, but people are talking about Rachel." I straightened up, forcing a smile. "Talking about what?" She hesitated, then leaned closer. "Late nights. Places she shouldn't be. Folks say she's gotten herself mixed up in something unusual." I let out a laugh sharper than I meant. "Rachel? My Rachel? She's working long hours, that's all. You know how people love to make stories out of nothing." Mrs. Hanley gave me a pitying look. "I hope you're right," she said softly, pushing her cart away. I stood there for a moment, holding that milk carton like it might break in my hands. My heart told me she was wrong. My pride told me to ignore it. And yet, her words echoed long after I left the store. That evening, sitting at my kitchen table, I poured coffee I didn't drink and stared at Rachel's picture on the mantel. The whisper had been planted, and no matter how many times I shook my head, I couldn't unhear it. She's fine, I muttered, forcing the words out. Rachel's fine. But for the first time I wasn't sure if I believed myself. One whisper I could dismiss. 2 whispers I could ignore. But whispers have a way of multiplying until they sound like truth. A few days later, I was at the hardware store picking up light bulbs when an old co-worker of Rachel's spotted me. His greeting was polite, but his words carried weight. "Jay, is Rachel doing all right?" he asked. "Of course," I said quickly. "She's fine, busy with work like always." He shifted uncomfortably. "It's just, she hasn't been in the office much. People say she's been calling out sick. HR's been asking questions." I forced a chuckle. Maybe she's working from home, that's how things are these days. But his eyes told me he didn't believe it. And worse, neither did I. Later that week at church, a family friend pulled me aside. "Jay, forgive me if I'm overstepping," she whispered, "but I saw Rachel the other night. She wasn't where she said she'd be. She was with some people I didn't recognize. They didn't look like the sort she usually keeps company with." By then, my chest was tight, my pulse heavy. Each voice added a brick to the wall of doubt building inside me, but every time I answered the same way, with denial. "You must have been mistaken. She's working hard, that's all. My daughter would never." But when I got home that evening, the silence pressed in on me. I looked again at her childhood photograph, and for the first time I felt something I hadn't before: fear. Not fear of Rachel herself, fear of the possibility that I didn't know her as well as I thought. That night the house felt heavier than usual. The clock ticked on the wall, steady and merciless, as though it was counting down to something I wasn't ready for. I sat at the kitchen table, a cold cup of coffee in front of me, and stared at the framed photographs lined up on the mantel. Rachel at 5, dressed as a fairy for Halloween. Rachel at 16, holding up her driver's license with a grin too wide for her face. Rachel at 22, shaking hands with her college dean. And then always, Rachel at 12 with that spelling bee trophy. I pressed my fingers against the photograph's glass as though I could hold on to the girl inside it, the one who was easy to trust, easy to understand. But memories don't answer back, and they don't explain late-night calls, missing work shifts, or rumors whispered in grocery store aisles. "Not my daughter," I said aloud, my voice rough in the empty room. Rachel wouldn't lie to me. She wouldn't hide something like this. But even as I said it, my chest tightened with doubt. I walked the hallway of my house, each step echoing too loudly. The silence clung to me, demanding that I face the truth I kept dodging. Love and trust were no longer the same thing. I wanted to believe her, to shield her from every cruel word spoken about her. But denial is its own kind of prison. I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom and saw a father divided. One part of me clung to pride, the pride of having raised a daughter who could do no wrong. The other part whispered the question I'd been too afraid to ask. What if they're right? I turned off the light, but sleep didn't come. The whispers had followed me home, and they weren't leaving any time soon. 2 days passed without a word from Rachel. That wasn't like her. Even when she was busy, she sent a heart emoji, a quick, "Love you, Dad," something. The quiet felt wrong, like a room where the window is open but the curtains don't move. Near midnight, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. Text: "You should watch her. Tonight isn't the first time." I sat up so fast my back protested. "Watch who?" I typed, even though I already knew the answer. Text: "Rachel." I stared at the screen, waiting for the spam link that never came. No demands for money, no claims about car warranties, just 2 more messages, landing like stones in still water. Text: "She's trying to handle this alone." Text: "She won't tell you because she's ashamed." I tried to call back, straight to voicemail. I texted, "Who are you? What is this about?" and got nothing. I carried the phone to the kitchen and set it beside the old wall clock. Tick, tock. The minutes sounded louder when you were deciding whether to be the kind of father who trusted blindly, or the kind who opened his eyes and risked seeing something he didn't want to see. I thought about Sunday mornings, about bakery bread and soft laughter that hadn't felt soft in weeks. I thought about the way Rachel's fingers hovered over her phone like it might bite her. I thought about every "she's fine" I'd said out loud to no one. A car rolled past outside, headlights washing over the curtains for a heartbeat. It looked like her model. I almost stepped out onto the porch. I didn't. Instead, I texted Rachel. "Me. You okay, kiddo?" A blue bubble appeared, then vanished. Then nothing. I poured coffee I didn't want and drank it anyway. Somewhere between the first and second cup, I made a quiet promise I hated. If the messages came again, or if the silence stretched much longer, I would stop telling myself a story I liked and start looking for the truth I was afraid of. I set the empty mug down and picked up the phone, as if I could will it to ring with the right answer. It stayed dark. And in that darkness, I felt a line inside me shift. Sunday arrived, the one day I could always count on Rachel to be mine, even for just a few hours. I set the table the way I always did. 2 mugs, cream on the side, bakery bread already warming in the oven. The smell filled the kitchen, carrying me back to quieter years when nothing in the world seemed uncertain. But 9 o'clock passed, then 10. The bread cooled. The coffee grew bitter in the pot. At 10:30, my phone buzzed with a text. "Rachel. Sorry, Dad. Not feeling well today. I'll come next week." I frowned, staring at the screen. Not feeling well? The words were too neat, too clean, like an excuse rehearsed. I carried the bread to the table and sat down anyway. My eyes flicked to the window, out to the street where the maple leaves shook in the autumn wind. And then I saw it, Rachel's car, passing right by my house. For a moment, I doubted my eyes. Maybe it wasn't her, but I'd recognize that dent on the rear bumper anywhere. I'd helped her patch it after she swore she misjudged the garage. I didn't move. I just sat there, gripping my phone so tight my knuckles turned white. The lie was small on the surface, not feeling well, but the truth in her passing car was deafening. I whispered into the empty kitchen, "Where are you going, Rachel?" And though the walls didn't answer, I already knew. The seed planted by whispers, by Mrs. Hanley, by co-workers, by friends, had finally rooted. This time I wasn't just hearing about my daughter. I was seeing the cracks for myself. That Sunday evening the air felt heavier than usual, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. I couldn't shake the image of Rachel's car rolling past my house after she told me she was too sick to visit. By dusk, I was pacing the kitchen, my hands restless, my heart caught between anger and fear. I told myself not to overreact. Maybe she was running an errand. Maybe she was headed somewhere important. But then I remembered the text from the unknown number. "You should watch her." The words replayed in my mind until they no longer sounded like advice. They sounded like a command. So, when Rachel texted again at 7:15, "Late working session tonight. Love you." I grabbed my car keys. I waited 10 minutes before pulling out of my driveway, careful not to switch on my headlights until I was a block away. My stomach twisted as I drove, feeling equal parts guilty and determined. I had never followed my daughter before. Fathers weren't supposed to. Fathers were supposed to trust. But trust felt like a coat too thin for the weather I was in. Rachel's car led me past downtown, away from the busy streets filled with restaurants and neon lights. Instead, she drove toward the industrial side of town, the part with warehouses and shuttered shops, where the sidewalks cracked and streetlights flickered like dying fireflies. Finally, she pulled over outside a rundown building with a flickering sign. She didn't get out right away. She sat there gripping the wheel, shoulders tense. From where I parked down the street, I could see her take 3 deep breaths before stepping into the night. The door swallowed her. I gripped my own steering wheel until my palms ached. Everything in me screamed to get out, to demand an explanation, to drag her back home where the world was safe. But another part of me, quieter, colder, knew I had to wait. I had to see. I sat there in the shadows, watching the place that had taken my daughter in, and in that moment, denial finally broke. "If you're still with me right now, do me a quick favor. hit the like button and subscribe to Voices of Uncle Jay. It helps me bring more of these stories to you, and it tells YouTube to share them with others who need to hear them. Thank you. I stayed in that car longer than I'd ever admit. 10 minutes, maybe 15, staring at that broken-down building Rachel had just walked into. My fingers drummed on the wheel, my chest tight with a storm I couldn't name. Finally, I turned the key and drove away. But the silence inside my car wasn't peace, it was punishment. The road home blurred past my headlights, but my mind was louder than the engine. Every whisper I'd brushed off came back in a chorus. She's changed. She's hiding something. She's not who you think she is. I gripped the wheel tighter. No, I said aloud like I was arguing with ghosts. She's fine. Rachel's fine. But then I saw her text again, glowing on my phone screen in the passenger seat. Late working session tonight. A lie. Plain as day. I pulled into my driveway and cut the engine. For a long time I just sat there, staring at the dark windows of my own house. It didn't feel like home anymore. Home was where you trusted the people you loved. Home was where lies didn't live. Inside, the air smelled like cold coffee and old bread. I dropped into the chair at the kitchen table and pressed my hands flat against the wood. The clock ticked above me, merciless. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Each sound felt like a hammer driving me deeper into the truth I didn't want to face. I had always thought of myself as a good father, loving, patient, forgiving. But that night I realized something cruel. Love could blind you. Pride could keep you from asking questions you didn't want answers to. And denial. Denial was just another word for fear. When I finally stood, it was with a decision I couldn't take back. I would follow Rachel again. Not once, not twice, until I knew the truth. Because the whispers were no longer whispers. They were the voice of my own doubt, and I couldn't live with it any longer. The week after I first tailed Rachel felt like a long grey hallway with no doors. Days stretched, thin and tight. I kept finding myself in rooms without remembering how I'd gotten there. The laundry room with the washer churning, the garage with the toolbox open, the kitchen with the kettle whistling itself hoarse. I was moving, but my mind was parked outside that building with the flickering sign. Rachel texted less. When she did, the words were clipped, almost efficient. Busy day. Love you. Call you later. She never called later. I told myself she was buried in work. Then I remembered the empty office rumors and swallowed hard. Sunday was our ritual, the rope that kept us tied. I woke early, proofed bread the way my wife had taught me years ago, and set 2 mugs on the table like place markers for hope. By 9, the house smelled like butter and coffee. By 10, the smell had turned into a quiet accusation. At 10:30, my phone buzzed. Rachel. Can't make it again today. Next week, Dad, I promise. I stared at the word promise until it blurred. A clock ticked in my head, slow at first, then louder, as if each second were crossing a line I'd drawn. I didn't text back. Instead, I stood at the window and watched the street because it felt like the only thing I could control. She passed the house at 11:03. Same dent on the rear bumper, same little bob of the antenna at higher speeds. No hesitation, not even a glance toward the porch, where I stood hidden behind the curtain like a thief in my own life. I could have let it go. I could have told myself she was driving a friend to the pharmacy, that she was too sick to stop. Instead, I grabbed my keys from the bowl by the door. They clinked like a small decision, turning into a big one. The day outside was bright and misleading, a pale blue sky that made everything look harmless. I waited 2 blocks before pulling out, easing into traffic far enough behind that I could count 2 cars between us most of the time. I kept my radio off. Even my breathing sounded too loud. Rachel drove with the careful impatience of someone who'd memorized every stoplight on this route. She didn't head toward downtown, the district with chrome letters on office buildings and cheerful people walking small dogs. She angled away from it, slipping past the polished streets into the map's margins, where the lines forgot to stay straight. The further we drove, the more the city showed its bones. Chain-link fences that needed paint, storefronts with hand-lettered "for lease" signs, A mural half finished, a mural half peeled. I hadn't been this way in years, maybe ever. I'm the kind of man who sticks to the same grocery store, the same gas station. The unfamiliar made me feel younger and older at once. Young because I was doing something reckless, old because I could feel my pulse in my wrists. At the next light, an old warehouse loomed on the right, the kind with narrow windows like slits in a helmet. A block later, bars stacked shoulder to shoulder, neon beer signs asleep in the daylight, a few chairs tipped upside down on tables. We passed a small park with 2 swings, chains creaking in the wind. A single glove lay under one swing, palm up. Rachel turned onto a narrow street, with cars packed tight along both curbs. I coasted to the corner and let a delivery van slide between us like a curtain. When she braked, her right blinker tapped out a nervous code. She pulled into a spot near a storefront with brown paper taped inside the windows. Up top, a faded hand-painted name had been scraped away, leaving only pale shadows of letters, the ghosts of an earlier business. The sidewalk out front sagged a little, as if it had been exhaling for years. Rachel didn't get out right away. She stayed in the driver's seat, both hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. I watched the tendons in her neck tighten as she swallowed. In my rearview mirror, my face looked like a mask I didn't recognize, jaw set, lips thin, eyes too bright. "Turn around," I told myself. The words came out in a whisper that fogged the steering wheel. "Give her space. Believe her." She reached for her phone. The blue glow lit her cheeks. A minute later, she put the phone down, closed her eyes, and breathed 1, 2, 3 times before opening the door. She stepped out and tucked her hands into the deep pockets of a coat I'd bought her 2 winters ago. She'd picked it because it was sensible. I'd paid for it because it looked warm. She kept her head down and walked quickly to the door. It opened before she reached it. The man who held it couldn't have been much older than her, but the lines around his mouth looked practiced. He wasn't big, but something about his posture took up space. He glanced left, then right, then at Rachel. They spoke. I couldn't hear a word, but I felt every syllable land in my chest. He stepped aside. She went in. He followed, and the door closed. I slid lower in my seat, palms slick now. A part of me, a loud, dangerous part, wanted to put the car in park and storm down the sidewalk. Another part, the one that still remembered how to fix a leaky pipe without breaking the wall, told me to wait. I had no plan, no authority, no idea what I was stepping into. I had only a father's fury and a pair of knees that complained when I crouched too long. A bus rattled past. A woman pushing a stroller glanced at the papered windows and accelerated, not running, just choosing to be somewhere else faster. 2 kids on bikes checked the door and kept going. The building sat in the street like a held breath. 10 minutes dragged by. I took in the details because that's what the mind does when it needs to hold still. A torn flyer stapled crooked to a telephone pole, a black plastic bag snagged high in a bare tree, the hum of a far-off HVAC unit that sounded like the ocean if you didn't think too hard. No one else went in. No one else came out. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and saw Rachel at 7, wrapped in a towel, hair dripping after the pool, asking if she'd ever be brave enough to jump off the deep end. "You don't have to be brave all the time," I'd told her, "just when it matters." She had nodded and jumped the next week. I opened my eyes to the quiet street. "Be brave now," I whispered, not sure whether I meant her or me. 5 more minutes. My phone buzzed. A spam text from a number promising lower rates on something I didn't need. I swiped it away. The screensaver came back on, a photo of Rachel and me at a minor league baseball game last summer, her head on my shoulder, my grin loud enough to be heard. The memory pinched. I put the phone face down. The door opened. Rachel stepped out first, shoulders still tight, the coat belt cinched hard around her waist. The man followed. I could see his mouth move. She handed him something, an envelope. He opened it and flipped through the contents with quick, practiced motions, licking his thumb every few pages. He shook his head once, slow. Rachel said something small. He glanced past her, scanned the street with eyes that missed nothing, then leaned closer, speaking fast. He tapped the envelope against his leg, then pointed back at the doorway, jerking his chin toward the inside. My fingers found the door handle. No, I said to myself. No. Every muscle in my left leg coiled anyway, ready to swing out. My heart beat in my throat. Rachel looked down, nodded. She took the envelope back, like it weighed more now, turned, and went inside again. The man stayed. He shifted his gaze down the block, the way cautious men scan, not panicking, just cataloguing. His eyes slid past my car. I held still as stone. He checked his watch, then the sky like it owed him something, and finally went in. Cold seeped through the seams of the car door and into my bones. I realized I'd been clenching my jaw so hard it ached. I forced it to relax and tasted metal where I'd bitten the inside of my cheek. "What is this?" I asked the empty car. There's a particular kind of fear reserved for parents. Worse than the fear of danger is the fear of the unknown kind. The trouble you can't name, the storm you can't chart. Two teenagers drifted by, hoods up against the wind. One pointed at the building. The other shook his head and kept moving. Somewhere, a siren cried and grew quiet again. I checked the time. Half an hour had passed. If I went in, what then? Would I demand to see her? Say what, I'm her father, and flash a driver's license like a badge? Could I even keep my voice from breaking? Pride tried on different costumes in my head. The tough man, the reasonable man, the patient man. None of them fit. I breathed slow, counting to 4 on the inhale, 4 on the exhale, like the nurse taught me after the blood pressure scare last spring. My pulse settled enough that I could think in sentences again. The unknown number that had texted me earlier in the week rose in my mind like a buoy. She's trying to handle this alone. My hands trembled with the urge to do something. Knock on the door, call the police, call a friend, call anyone. But another truth entered the car and sat beside me. Barging in without knowing what I was barging into could make things worse. For her, for me, for both of us. I started the car, not to leave, just to feel like I could if I had to. A shadow passed behind the papered window, thin, angled, there and gone. My stomach flipped. I pictured Rachel on the other side, at a folding table under a flickering light, counting cash she didn't have, signing something she shouldn't sign, nodding at words that weren't choices. Or maybe it wasn't that at all. Maybe it was a landlord's back office, a late rent check, a borrowed advance. Maybe it was a support group that didn't trust outsiders. Maybe it was nothing, and I was a foolish old man. A door slammed somewhere up the block, sharp enough to make me flinch. A gust of wind drove grit against the windshield in a dry hiss. I rubbed the heel of my hand over my eyes and saw the kitchen at home, the 2 mugs cooling side by side, the bread gone crust hard. I'd set a table for 2 and eaten alone. Enough. I shifted into drive, rolled forward slowly, and took one last look at the building as I passed. The paper in the windows was taped in crooked squares, one corner peeling back to show a sliver of darkness inside. Someone had written something on the paper in faint pencil, just a circle and an arrow. A mark meant for someone who understood it. I didn't. On the way home I took different streets on purpose, as if not retracing my route could change what I'd seen. The neighborhood softened as I drove. More trees, wider sidewalks, porches with potted plants. By the time I turned onto my block, the sky had gone the color of dishwater. I parked and sat a moment longer, listening to the engine click as it cooled. The house waited, quiet and stubborn. Inside, the kitchen still smelled like the morning. I poured a glass of water and realized my hands were shaking enough to rattle the ice. I set the glass down and braced my palms on the counter until the tremor settled. The clock on the wall clucked its tongue at me. I pulled out a chair and sat. I've never been much for praying out loud, but I said something anyway. Half plea, half promise. Let her be okay. I'll do this right. Just let her be okay. My phone vibrated. For a split second, every muscle gathered itself. I turned the screen over. A message from Rachel. Rachel, long day. Hope you rested. Love you. Not, I'm safe. Not, I'm sorry I missed Sunday. Not anything I could hold on to. I typed love you too and didn't hit send. I deleted it, then typed it again and sent it, because fathers often send the thing that asks for nothing and hopes for everything. Then I opened a note and wrote down what I remembered. Time, place, the color of the man's jacket, the way he checked the street, the envelope, the headshake. It felt wrong to make a list of my daughter like a suspect. It felt worse not to. In the mirror over the mantel, I caught my reflection. Shoulders slumped, mouth a tight line, eyes older than yesterday. I thought of the photo beside it. Rachel at 12, a medal ribbon around her neck, looking like the future had already decided to be kind. I took it down, not to hide it, but because I couldn't meet both faces at once without breaking. I sat back at the table, palms flat again, and told the truth to the only person who would listen. "She's in something," I said. The words scuffed my throat on their way out. And I can't fix what I won't face. The decision formed, heavy and cold. I would follow her again. But not the way I had today, with nerves and guesswork. I would be careful. I'd plan. I'd write down times and routes. I'd pay attention to the faces, the cars, the signs. If this was bigger than late bills and bad company, I would need more than worry. I would need proof. I would need help. I took a pen and drew a line down the center of a clean sheet of paper. On the left, I wrote, "What I know." On the right, "What I think." Under know, I listed the place, the envelope, the man's scanning eyes, the texted promise she broke. Under think, I wrote debts, bad loan, pressure, shame. The last word made my chest ache. Shame makes people lie to the ones they love most. It tells you you're protecting them when you're only walling yourself in. I folded the paper and put it in the drawer with the takeout menus. I turned off the kitchen light. The house went dim in a way that felt more like quiet than defeat. In bed, the dark didn't feel empty. It felt crowded, with the alley door, the envelope, the headshake. I could have sworn I heard the hum of that building's old HVAC unit pressed against my pillow. I rolled onto my side and watched the red-lit digits of the clock change to the next minute, and the next. Somewhere after 2, sleep finally found me. It was thin and easily startled. I woke before dawn with an answer already in my mouth. I would ask Rachel directly. Not a hint, not a half question she could step around. I would look her in the eye and tell her what I'd seen, and if her answers didn't fit, I would stop playing detective in the dark and take what I had to someone who could actually help. I made coffee and stood at the window. The street was the soft color of promises you mean to keep. In the distance, a garbage truck labored, brakes squealing like something trying to hold still. The world was starting over one more time, like it always does, regardless of who's ready. I sipped, set the mug down, and picked up my phone. My thumbs hovered over the screen long enough for the device to dim in self-defense. I woke it and typed, "Me. Can you come by tonight? We need to talk, Rach." Even before the 3 dots appeared, I knew the answer would decide what kind of father I had to be next. The kind who believes without looking, or the kind who loves with his eyes open. I hit send. The message went blue. I stood still and listened for the sound a life makes when it changes. It isn't loud. It's more like the click of a key turning in a door you didn't know was locked. Rachel's reply didn't come right away. It arrived several hours later, a blue bubble dropping onto the screen like a small stone in a deep pond. Rachel, "Tonight works. Around 7. 7. The number sounded simple, practical, but I could feel it like weight settling on the house, on the hallways, the picture frames, the air itself. 7 meant there would be no more pretending. 7 meant I had to decide what kind of father I was going to be when the truth stood in the doorway and looked me in the eye. The day refused to pass quickly. I tried to give it chores to chew on, tightened the loose cabinet hinge that had chirped for a month, wiped the dust off the top of the refrigerator where no one but time ever looks, sorted mail into the same neat piles, bills, coupons, things that could wait. I watered the half-dozen plants my wife used to call her green children, touching each leaf as if an apology could keep it alive. Every task took twice as long and left nothing behind but the feeling I'd been stalling the ocean with a broom. By late afternoon, I'd rehearsed a dozen openings and hated all of them. "We need to talk." "Too cold." "You're scaring me." "Too vulnerable." "Too easy to explain away." I followed you. Too sharp. Truth spoken like a blade. What I wanted was a sentence that could hold both love and fury without breaking, a door that opened into a hallway with lights on. At 6:30 I warmed bread I had no appetite for, set out 2 mugs even though one always cooled untouched, put cream where she liked it, folded a napkin the way she used to fold paper swans when she was 10, and convinced origami could teach her anything patience couldn't. The house felt ready and unsteady at once, like a chair on a floor you hadn't noticed was crooked. By 6:57 the sky had the washed-out blue of a bruise just before dusk. At 7:02, headlights washed across the living room walls, and the front window threw a rectangle of moving light across the floor. My heart did a strange thing. It sped up and steadied at the same time, like it had finally decided to be useful. The deadbolt turned with a sound I've known my whole adult life. Rachel stepped inside with the careful quiet of someone entering a church before a funeral. Her coat was belted tight, her hair pulled back in a hurry that tried to pass for neat. "Hi, Dad," she said, and the way she said Dad was gentle, practiced, like she remembered the right word but not how to wear it. "Hey, kiddo," I answered, and heard my own voice try to land between soft and stern. "Come in. Bread's warm." She set a paper bag on the table, the same bakery logo stamped on the side, the same faint grease darkening the corner. For a second I flashed on 100 Sundays, 100 small routines that had disguised themselves as promises. She didn't sit. Her hand rested lightly on the back of the chair as if the wood might tell her what to do. "Traffic was bad," she offered, a peace treaty in 5 syllables. I said. "It does that." Silence arrived like a 4th person, bold enough to pull out a chair. Somewhere inside the wall the heater clicked on and sent warm air through vents that sounded like breathing. Rachel's eyes made quick, gentle circuits of the room, mantel, window, the old clock above the stove. When she reached my face, she looked away. "Coffee?" I asked, even though the machine had already burbled its last hours ago. "I'm okay," she said, "thanks." "Sit with me," I said, and heard the request turn into a plea on its way across the table. She lowered herself into the chair but stayed on its edge, posture alert, as if the chair could throw her if she trusted it too much. Her fingers found a napkin and folded, unfolded, refolded it. No swans, just rectangles that wouldn't stay. "We need to talk," I said. The words were calm, but they came from a place in me where calm had been hard won. Her face moved through 3 expressions too quickly to catalogue: defense, exhaustion, something like resolve, before landing on a small, careful neutrality. "Dad, whatever you think you know," I lifted a hand. Not to stop her, not like that. To slow the spin. "I don't think, Rachel. I saw." The sentence hung there, solid enough to touch. She swallowed, and the sound was loud in the quiet room. Her eyes dipped to the table, her fingers stilled on the napkin, and then let it go. "What did you see?" she asked, and I realized it wasn't a challenge. It was a request for limits. How much she had to face, how much of the story had already escaped her control. I made myself breathe. In for 4, out for 4. "I saw you drive past the house after you told me you were too sick to come. I followed. I saw where you parked. I saw you go into a storefront with paper on the windows. I saw a man let you in later. I saw you hand him an envelope. He counted, shook his head. He talked. You nodded. You went back inside." Her shoulders, which had been holding themselves up by policy, dropped a full inch. She didn't deny it. She didn't gasp. She didn't perform the polite surprise good people keep in their pockets for when they're accused of what they didn't do. She just rubbed her temple with 2 fingers and closed her eyes for a heartbeat. "Okay," she said. "Okay." I felt something inside me tilt, relief and dread sharing a chair. "Okay, what?" "Okay. You saw enough that lying to you would be cruel." She opened her eyes and met mine for the first time since she'd stepped inside. They were rimmed red, not with fresh crying, but with the salt of many small defeats. "I didn't want to do it this way," she said. "I didn't want you to find out this way." "You mean you didn't want me to find out?" I said. It came out sharper than I intended. I softened it with the truth. "Rachel, I'm not angry that you need help. I'm angry that you made me blind to the fact that you do." She flinched like the word blind had touched a bruise. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I know, I said, and meant it. But you did. She took a breath and let it out slow. I thought I could fix it before you noticed. I thought if I just kept moving, kept juggling, I could... She made a gesture with both hands, a pantomime of settling a stack that insisted on sliding. I wanted to be your pride a little longer. You don't keep my pride by pretending to be perfect, I said. You keep it by letting me stand next to you when you aren't. The heater clicked off. The sudden quiet felt like a stage cue. Who is he? I asked, gentler. The man at the door. Not who, she said. What? I waited. She stared at the table as if the wood grain spelled something she could only read if she didn't blink. The building. It's not a bar, not really. It's a place where people come when they need money right now and don't have the kind of life banks say yes to. The what is a lender that doesn't put its name on paper. How much? I asked. My voice surprised me with its steadiness. Too much, she said, then corrected herself with a grim little smile I didn't recognize. Enough that when you start paying, the numbers don't go down. They just change shape. And the envelope? I asked. A payment, she said. An apology. She paused, then added, a warning. The room tilted another degree. Rachel, I said, my hands flat on the table, what are you into? She shook her head. Not drugs, Dad. Not crime. Nothing like that. She saw the question in my face and shook it again, firmer. I swear to you. I made mistakes. I let them get bigger than me, that's all. It's not... She closed her eyes, reopened them. It's not the worst thing your mind can invent. But it's bad enough. I nodded once. It was not absolution. Not yet. It was permission to continue. Why didn't you come to me? I asked, and I hated how small and human the question sounded, the child in it. Why didn't you trust me? The father in it. Why wasn't I enough? She smiled, brittle and kind. Because you look at me like I'm still holding that spelling bee trophy, she said. Because when I'm in this kitchen, I feel 12 and perfect, and I didn't want to watch that change in your eyes. I let my own eyes sting without apology. That photo is a memory, Rachel, not a standard. It's not a test you have to pass, it's a day we both loved. She took that in and tucked it somewhere I hoped she could reach later. I thought if I kept paying I could breathe, she said, but the payments are the breath. You don't breathe between them. You breathe for them. How long? I asked. Months, she said. Long enough to get used to pretending it's temporary. The dishwasher light blinked silently in the corner, another machine waiting for a command. I leaned forward, elbows on the wood we'd scarred with serving spoons and homework, and one errant hammer years ago. Listen to me, I said. I can't make promises yet. I don't know what all of this is. But I know this. I won't let you drown where I can reach you. Her mouth trembled. She looked down fast, as if she could catch the tears before they fell by avoiding eye contact. There's more, she said so quietly the table might have to repeat it for me. I didn't tell you everything because I wasn't ready to admit it to myself, and because the more people who know, the scarier it gets. What else? I asked. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at the mantel, looked back. If I keep doing it alone, she said, I think they're going to make sure I don't do it at all. The sentence didn't shout. It thudded, low and final, somewhere beneath the ribs. I reached across the table and turned my hand palm up. She stared at it as if it were a tool whose use she'd forgotten. When she put her hand in mine, it was colder than it should have been. I closed my fingers around hers and felt how small the bones were, how big the fear. We're going to do this in daylight, I said. No more papered windows, no more envelopes in doorways. If you want me in, you don't get to keep me half out. She nodded. A real nod. Not compliance, not performance. Agreement. Okay, she said. Then after a beat that added years to the word, okay. Somewhere, a car hissed by on wet pavement. The clock above the stove moved its hands forward with patient certainty. In our small kitchen, a new shape formed. Awkward, raw, true, Not a solution, a start. Rachel's fingers trembled faintly in my hand. I could feel the pulse in her wrist racing faster than mine, as if her body was carrying a secret even her words couldn't hold yet. "Dad," she said quietly, "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I thought I was being smart, careful. I thought it was just temporary." Her voice cracked on the last word. She pulled her hand back gently, folding her arms tight across her chest like she was holding herself together. I didn't rush her. I knew better. Rachel had always been the kind of child who spoke in layers. You had to wait for the first one to peel back before you could glimpse the next. She drew in a breath, steadying herself. "It started small. You remember when the company I was with got downsized last year?" I nodded. That memory was sharp. She had come over with a brave smile and said it wasn't a big deal, that she'd get back on her feet soon. We'd eaten spaghetti that night, laughing at an old sitcom, and I'd believed her. "Well," she continued, "I was out of work longer than I told you. Savings went faster than I expected. Rent, bills, car insurance, they pile up whether you're ready or not. At first, I borrowed from friends. 100 here, 200 there, but pride is expensive, Dad." I hated asking. So when I found a flyer, just a piece of paper taped to a lamppost, promising fast loans, no questions asked, I told myself it was just to get through 1 month. She gave a bitter laugh that didn't sound like her. 1 month turned into 2, then 4, then more, and the interest— Her voice broke again. "You think you're climbing out, but every payment just digs you deeper." I felt the muscles in my jaw tighten. "And the men at that building?" She closed her eyes. "Collectors. They don't wear uniforms, but they might as well. They don't shout, not at first. They don't need to. They look at you like they know how much air you breathe, and how easy it would be to take some away." My stomach churned. "Rachel, how much do you owe?" She shook her head. "I don't even know anymore. The numbers change every time they hand me a new piece of paper. Fees, interest, penalties. Half of it doesn't even make sense. But when I argued once, just once, the man smiled and said, 'You can always pay in other ways.'" Her words chilled the air between us. I leaned forward. "And you've been facing this alone? For months?" Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "I couldn't tell you, Dad. Not after Mum. You've been through enough. I didn't want to be another weight on your shoulders." I shook my head. My voice came out lower than I expected. "Rachel, you're not a weight. You're my daughter. You're the reason I stand up in the morning." She swallowed hard, lips pressed tight as though holding back words that threatened to spill too far. "There's more," she whispered, "but not tonight. I'm not ready to say all of it. Not yet." Her eyes met mine, pleading, fragile and terrified of what my answer might be. I wanted to demand the rest, to slam my fist on the table until the whole story fell out. But I knew if I pushed too hard, I'd break what little trust she'd placed in my hands. So I nodded once, though the fire in my chest burned hotter. "Then start here," I said firmly. "No more lies, no more Sunday excuses. Whatever you're hiding, we face it together, even if you can't tell me all of it yet." Rachel exhaled shakily, like she'd been holding her breath for months. "Together," she repeated, the word fragile but alive. And though I still didn't know the full truth, I knew one thing. The walls she'd built around her secrets had just cracked. After Rachel left that night, the house felt like it was holding its breath. The bread sat untouched on the table, its crust hardening in the cooling air. I poured out the coffee we never drank and rinsed the mugs, but the clink of porcelain in the sink sounded louder than it should have. I told myself progress had been made. She'd admitted enough to know the whispers weren't just rumors. She'd promised we'd face it together. But promises, I was starting to learn, were fragile currency. It was close to midnight when the phone rang. Not Rachel's ringtone, not a number I knew, just a string of digits that looked stitched together at random. "Hello?" My voice was steady, though my hand tightened on the receiver. Silence. Then a low chuckle, soft, deliberate. "Mr. Walker." The voice was male, smooth like glass sliding over stone. "Yes," I said cautiously. "You should tell Rachel to keep her appointments." Every muscle in my body tensed. "Who is this?" "That doesn't matter." His tone carried the calm of someone who never rushed. "She missed a deadline tonight. Deadlines have consequences." I swallowed hard. "She's trying to make it right. Give her time." "Time," he repeated, as though tasting the word. "That's the one thing she doesn't have. And neither do you, Mr. Walker. You seem like a smart man. Smart men know when to stay out of what isn't theirs." A cold shiver crawled down my back. "She's my daughter. That makes it mine." The chuckle came again, darker this time. "Then consider this your courtesy call. Don't let her slip again. Next time, we won't be so polite." The line clicked dead. I stood there, the dial tone buzzing in my ear like a wasp. Slowly, I set the phone down, though my hand kept trembling long after it left the receiver. The house was silent again, but it wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of a predator waiting in the dark. I sank into the chair at the table, rubbing my temples. This was no longer whispers, no longer suspicion. This was threat. This was real. And for the first time I wondered not just what Rachel was hiding, but whether I had the strength to fight what she had walked into. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that voice again, smooth, steady, cruel in its calmness. "Don't let her slip again. Next time, we won't be so polite." I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the shadows of the fan blades stretching and shifting with each passing car outside. At one point, I tried to pray, but the words felt thin, scattered, like stones thrown into an ocean that swallowed them whole. By 4 in the morning, I gave up on sleep entirely. I sat at the kitchen table with a notepad, the same one I used for grocery lists, and wrote a new list. At the top, in block letters, "What I know." Rachel is in debt to men who don't write contracts. They know my name, my house, my phone number. They are watching. She is terrified, but she's still protecting them or protecting me. If I do nothing, they will not stop. Underneath, I wrote, "What I don't know, how much she owes, who exactly they are, what they want if money runs out, how far they're willing to go." The second list was longer, too long. I sat back, rubbing the bridge of my nose. For weeks, I had clung to denial, wrapping myself in it like a coat against winter winds. But denial was threadbare now, and last night's phone call had ripped it to shreds. No more pretending. No more whispering to myself that Rachel was fine. She wasn't fine. And if I kept standing still, she wouldn't be safe either. The thought of calling the police crossed my mind. I even picked up the phone once, my thumb hovering over the keypad. But what would I tell them? That my grown daughter had taken loans from nameless men in papered window buildings. That I'd followed her, watched her hand over envelopes, and listened to threats over the phone. It was evidence made of smoke. And smoke, I knew, slipped through fingers too easily. I poured coffee I didn't need, drank it anyway, and stared at the steam curling upward. By sunrise, my decision was made. If Rachel couldn't fight this alone, and she couldn't, then I would fight it with her. Not as the blind father I had been, but as the man who had seen enough to know danger when it looked him in the eye. At 7 or sharp, I texted her, "Me, come over tonight. No excuses. We need to make a plan." The dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. Finally, her reply came through. "Rachel." "Okay, I'll be there." I set the phone down, my hand steady for the first time in weeks. This wasn't about whispers anymore. This wasn't about pride or even trust. This was about survival. And survival, I decided, was something we'd face together. Rachel showed up right on time that evening, 7 sharp. That alone told me she was taking things seriously. She walked in without the usual bag from the bakery, no small talk, no warm smile. Just Rachel, tired, tense, and raw. We sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where so many of our conversations had happened over the years. But this time, there was no bread between us. Just a legal pad I'd placed in the middle, a pen lying across the page like a sword waiting to be picked up. She looked at it, then at me. "What's this?" "Our plan," I said. My voice didn't shake. Her shoulders dropped slightly, not in relief, but in resignation. She pulled out the chair, sat down and folded her hands in front of her. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's do this." I picked up the pen and drew 2 columns. On the left, what we owe. On the right, what we have. "Rachel," I said softly but firmly, "I need numbers, real numbers, not guesses, not maybes. How much?" Her lips pressed together. She stared at her hands for a long time, and I thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, she spoke. "About 12,000, maybe more." "Maybe," I pressed. She winced. "It started at 3, it doubled. Then fees, interest. Every time I pay, they add more." "I don't even know anymore, Dad." Her voice broke. "It's like trying to scoop water out of a sinking boat with my hands. I wrote it down anyway, 12,000 plus, uncertain." "Okay," I said. "Now what we have." Her laugh was humorless. "Not much. My checking account's nearly empty. I've been giving them everything." I jotted, "Savings. Empty." I nodded slowly. "I have some set aside. Retirement, emergency fund. Not enough to clear all of this, but enough to get leverage." She shook her head fiercely. "No, Dad, I can't let you burn through your future because of my mistake." I met her eyes. "Rachel, my future is you. If you're drowning, what good is money sitting in a bank?" Her mouth trembled. She looked away. I tapped the page. "So here's what we do. First, we take this to daylight. No more cash in envelopes. We go to a bank. We talk to a lawyer. Even if they laugh us out of the room, at least it's legal light, not backroom shadows." She hesitated. "They won't like that." "Good," I said flatly. "Let them not like it. I'd rather face their anger in the open than their threats in the dark." The silence that followed was heavy, but different. Not the silence of secrets, the silence of 2 people gathering courage. Rachel reached for the pen. She scribbled something under what we owe. A name, a number. I looked at it and felt my chest tighten. The number wasn't the total, it was a phone number. "What's this?" I asked. She swallowed. "The man who calls the shots. He gave it to me once. Said if I was serious, I could reach him directly." I stared at the digits, memorizing them, even as I hated them. A string of numbers that meant danger. Rachel's voice was almost a whisper. "Dad, I'm scared." I placed my hand over hers. "Good. Stay scared. Fear keeps us careful. But listen to me. We are not backing down. Not now." For the first time that night, she nodded without hesitation. The next evening, the house wasn't quiet. My grandson Ethan was over for dinner. Rachel had dropped him off earlier in the day with a tired smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just for a few hours, Dad," she'd said. "I have errands." She didn't explain further, and I didn't ask. Ethan was 13, that tender age where childhood and adolescence wrestle for space in the same body. He had his mother's eyes, sharp and watchful, and her habit of fidgeting when something was on his mind. We ate spaghetti at the kitchen table, the same way Rachel and I had years ago. Ethan twirled noodles around his fork, but didn't eat much. His leg bounced under the table, making the salt shaker tremble. "You're quiet tonight," I said gently, spearing a meatball. "Everything all right at school?" He shrugged. "Yeah, school's fine." But his tone said otherwise. I leaned back, watching him. "You know you can talk to me, right?" He nodded quickly, too quickly. "I know." The conversation drifted. Homework, video games, a story about a classmate's disastrous science experiment. But every time the room fell quiet, Ethan's gaze flicked to the door, then to me, then back to his plate, like he was waiting for someone to come in, or for me to ask the right question. When dinner was done, he helped me clear the table without being asked. Another sign. He was nervous, restless, carrying something. We washed dishes in silence, the only sound the splash of water and the clink of plates. Finally, Ethan spoke. Grandpa? His voice was soft, like he was testing the weight of the word. Yes, buddy? He stared at the suds on his hands. If someone you loved was doing something bad, but they thought it was for a good reason, would you tell? The question stopped me cold. My pulse quickened. I dried my hands slowly, buying time. That's a big question, I said carefully. Depends on what kind of bad, and what kind of good. Ethan bit his lip. What if it could hurt them? Or hurt you? I crouched a little so I was eye level with him. Ethan, are you talking about your mom? His eyes darted up, wide and guilty. He didn't answer right away. Then, with a tiny nod, he whispered, She doesn't want you to know, but I can't keep it anymore. My heart pounded in my chest. This wasn't just a boy being nosy. This was a child drowning in an adult's secret, one heavy enough to break him if he held it too long. I put my hands gently on his shoulders. Ethan, I said, steady but firm, whatever it is, you can tell me. Right here. Right now. His throat worked as he swallowed. Then he said the words that changed everything. Grandpa, Mom's not just paying them back. She's doing things for them. Things she doesn't want you to find out about. Ethan's words hung in the air like smoke, curling into every corner of the kitchen. She's doing things for them. Things she doesn't want you to find out about. I felt my stomach drop, as if the floor had tilted under me. My first instinct was denial. No, he's mistaken. He's exaggerating. He doesn't understand what he saw. But the look in his eyes told me otherwise. Those weren't the eyes of a boy spinning a story. They were the eyes of a child who had carried truth like a stone in his pocket for far too long. I sat down slowly, trying to steady my breathing. Ethan, I said carefully, I need you to tell me everything. No guessing, no holding back, just the truth. What do you mean your mum is doing things for them? His lip trembled, but he nodded. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat, his small hands gripping the edge of the table. I didn't mean to find out, but sometimes when she thinks I'm asleep, I hear her on the phone, whispering, saying she'll do what they ask, that she doesn't have a choice. My chest tightened. What kind of things, Ethan? He looked down at his lap, twisting his fingers together. Errands, deliveries. Once she left in the middle of the night and told me not to tell anyone. Another time she came home with her jacket ripped. She said she fell, but she was crying. I knew it wasn't just a fall. The blood roared in my ears. My Rachel, the girl with the spelling bee trophy, the woman who baked bread on Sundays, reduced to running jobs for men who preyed on fear. Ethan's voice wavered, but he pressed on. She keeps telling me it's temporary, that she just has to do what they say until the debt is gone. But Grandpa, his eyes filled with tears, I don't think it's ever gonna be gone. I reached across the table and grabbed his hands, squeezing them gently. You did the right thing telling me, Ethan. You hear me? You did the right thing. He nodded shakily, but the tears spilled over. She's scared all the time, and I'm scared too. I don't want them to hurt her or you. I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight as his small frame shook. In that moment, the weight of everything settled on me. Not just Rachel's fear, but Ethan's too. He was a child caught in the crossfire of adult mistakes and ruthless men. Over his shoulder, my eyes landed on the legal pad still sitting on the table. What we know, what we don't. The list suddenly seemed too neat, too small for the reality we were facing. Because now I knew the truth. Rachel wasn't just drowning in debt. She was being dragged under by men who intended to use her until she broke. And if I didn't act soon, I risked losing not just my daughter, but my grandson's innocence too. I held Ethan until his sobs softened into shivers. His head rested against my chest, the way it had when he was 5 and scraped his knee on the driveway. But this wasn't a scrape. This was deeper, heavier, and I knew bandages wouldn't fix it. When he finally pulled back, I cupped his face in my hands. Listen to me, Ethan, you're safe here. Do you understand? No matter what happens, you are safe. He nodded, though the doubt in his eyes cut me deeper than any words could. After I tucked him into the spare room and waited for his breathing to settle, I returned to the kitchen. The house was quiet, but my mind was loud. Ethan's words replayed over and over. She's doing things for them, errands, deliveries, coming home crying. My fists clenched until my knuckles ached. I paced the length of the kitchen, the floor creaking under my steps. For weeks I'd been telling myself I was protecting Rachel by giving her space, by trusting her. But that space had given her captors room to tighten their grip. That trust had let her sink deeper into their control. Now my grandson was carrying the weight of secrets he never should have known. That was the breaking point. I stopped pacing and planted both hands on the table, leaning over the notepad we had started. The pen still lay across the page like an unfinished sentence. The lists stared up at me. What we know, what we don't. I tore the page in half. This wasn't about lists anymore. This wasn't about quiet plans and patient waiting. This was about my daughter being used, threatened, broken down, and my grandson being dragged into the darkness alongside her. My blood boiled hot in my veins. I could almost hear that man's voice again, mocking me over the phone. Next time we won't be so polite. I slammed my fist onto the table, the sound echoing through the empty kitchen. No more, I growled. No more lies, no more secrets, no more men in shadows telling my daughter how to live. The words surprised me, but they felt right. Solid, heavy, like stone laid into the foundation of a new house. I grabbed my phone and stared at Rachel's name in my contacts. My thumb hovered over the call button, my heart pounding. I wasn't sure if I would scream, beg, or cry when she answered. Maybe all three. But one thing was certain. She was going to tell me the rest. Tonight. Because after Ethan's confession, there was no space left for silence. I pressed the button. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Finally, Rachel's tired voice answered. Dad? I didn't waste a second. We need to talk. Now. No more delays. Her silence on the other end was heavy, but when she finally spoke, her voice was small. I figured Ethan might say something. I'll come over. I hung up, set the phone down, and sank back into my chair. My heart was racing, but my course was clear. This time Rachel wasn't walking back into my house as a woman who could hide pieces of her truth. She was walking in as a daughter who owed me everything. Every detail, every fear, every scar she had been hiding, and I was ready to hear it all. The knock came just after 9. Firm, hesitant, like someone announcing themselves but praying the door wouldn't open. I was already standing in the hallway. I opened the door without a word. Rachel stood there, her coat drawn tight around her frame, hair pulled back, dark circles under her eyes. She looked smaller than I remembered, like the world had been shaving her down piece by piece. Dad, she said softly. Inside, I replied. She stepped past me, her gaze flicking toward the spare room where Ethan was asleep. For a moment guilt flashed across her face, so raw it was almost painful to see. She knew he had spoken. We walked into the kitchen. I didn't offer coffee this time, didn't gesture to the bread box or the mugs. This wasn't a Sunday ritual anymore. This was an interrogation wrapped in love, and I wasn't about to let her dodge me. She sat at the table first, folding her arms tight as though she could hold her secrets in place. I took the chair opposite, leaning forward, my hands flat against the scarred wood. Ethan told me, I said, her head jerked up, eyes wide. He what? Don't blame him. My voice was sharp, louder than I intended. He's 13, Rachel. 13, and he's been carrying your secrets like sandbags tied to his chest. He couldn't keep it anymore, and he shouldn't have had to. Tears filled her eyes instantly. Oh, God. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. I didn't want him to know. I tried to keep him away from it. You failed, I cut in, my voice breaking. You failed him, and you failed me. And if you don't give me the truth right now, you're going to lose more than that. She looked up, her eyes red, her breath uneven. Dad, please. No more half-truths, I snapped, my hand slamming the table so hard the salt shaker toppled. No more vague excuses. No more whispers about loans and payments. Ethan told me you've been doing things for them. Running errands, deliveries, coming home crying. Tell me what they're making you do. Her lips parted, but no words came. Her hands twisted in her lap, fingers knotting and unknotting like ropes fraying under pressure. "Rachel!" I leaned forward, my voice raw. "Do you think I can't handle the truth? Do you think I'd rather sit here in the dark while my daughter is being used by men who see her as a pawn? Do you think I'm that weak?" Her tears spilled over. She shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "No. I thought I was protecting you, protecting Ethan. But I made it worse." "Then fix it," I demanded. "Start by telling me everything." She inhaled shakily, her chest rising and falling. "You don't understand. Once they know you're involved, Dad, they'll come for you too." I slammed my palm flat against the table. "They already have." Her eyes widened. I leaned closer, my voice low and furious. "They called me, Rachel, at midnight. They know my name, my house, my number. They told me not to let you slip again. That next time they wouldn't be so polite. So don't you dare pretend I'm not already in this." The room went dead quiet except for the ticking of the old wall clock. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Rachel's face crumpled. She dropped her head into her hands and sobbed. Not polite tears, not careful ones, but the kind that rip open years of shame all at once. I didn't move to comfort her. Not yet. Not until she spoke. When she finally lifted her face, blotched and wet, she whispered, "They're using me, Dad, and it's worse than you think." Rachel's face was streaked with tears, her eyes red, her hands trembling as she pressed them against her forehead. For a long moment, she just sat there, shoulders hunched, as if bracing for an earthquake only she could feel. Finally, she whispered, "You were right. Ethan told you the part I didn't want you to know. They're not just taking money, Dad. They're using me." The words came out ragged, like each one cut her throat on the way out. I leaned forward, my pulse thudding in my ears. "Using you how?" Her eyes flicked toward the window, as if afraid someone was out there listening. Her voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. "Errands, deliveries, picking things up, dropping things off." At first it was small. Packages, envelopes. I told myself it was harmless, that I didn't ask questions, that I didn't know what was inside. But the truth is, I did know. I knew enough. I gripped the table's edge. "What kind of packages?" She hesitated, then forced the words out. "Cash, papers, once, jewelry. Another time, a bag I didn't open but was heavy, too heavy for what they said it was." I felt my jaw tighten. "And you did it because they told you to?" "Because they said if I didn't, they'd double what I owed," she said, her voice breaking. "And when I argued, just once, they told me they knew where Ethan went to school. They described the route he takes home. They even named one of his teachers." My blood went ice cold. Rachel's tears spilled faster now, unchecked. So I said yes. Every time they called, every time they handed me something, I said yes. Because what choice did I have? I couldn't pay, I couldn't fight them. I thought if I kept doing what they asked, they'd let me go once the debt was paid. "And now?" I asked. My voice low, trembling with anger, I tried to keep steady. She gave a broken laugh. "Now the debt never ends. Every errand adds more, every delay adds penalties. They keep me running, Dad. Like a dog chasing a bone it can never catch." I clenched my fists. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you come the first time they threatened Ethan?" Her shoulders shook. "Because I was ashamed, because I thought you'd see me as weak, as stupid, as reckless. Because I thought if I dragged you into this, they'd destroy you too. I wanted to protect you, Dad. I wanted to protect both of you." My throat ached, but my voice came out hard. "Rachel, protecting us doesn't mean selling yourself to them piece by piece. Protecting us doesn't mean teaching Ethan how to carry secrets too heavy for a grown man. Protecting us means letting us fight for you." She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw in her eyes both the terrified child I had once carried on my shoulders and the exhausted woman trying to carry her own son through the storm. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "I don't know how to get out, Dad. I don't know if there is a way out." I reached across the table and gripped her hand. "There is, and we're going to find it. Together. Because they may think they own you, but they don't. They've never owned you. You're my daughter, and I will not let them take you." Her hand squeezed mine back, weak but real. For the first time in weeks, she didn't look alone. But behind her eyes I saw it, the fear that even love might not be enough to fight the darkness waiting outside our door. After Rachel's confession, the house seemed to change. The walls that once held family photos and Sunday laughter now felt like stone barriers keeping out the world beyond. The air was heavy with her words. I don't know if there is a way out. But I knew one thing. If we kept waiting, if we kept paying, if we kept bending, there would be no end. They'd strip Rachel down to nothing, and when she had nothing left, they'd move to Ethan. That was the line in the sand. I didn't sleep again that night. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with the notepad, scribbling ideas under the dim glow of the overhead light. Words filled the page. Observe, record, expose, confront, over and over, circling each one until the ink bled through. Rachel found me there at sunrise. She looked hollow, but she sat across from me without a word. "I've been thinking," I said quietly. "If they think you're powerless, then we use that against them." She frowned. "Dad, they're dangerous. You don't just trick people like this. They'll come after us." "They already are," I countered. "But people like them thrive in the shadows. They depend on fear, secrecy. What if we shine a light? What if we catch them in their own game?" Rachel hesitated. "How?" I tapped the notepad. "They gave you a number, didn't they? The man in charge. We can use it. Next time they call, we don't just answer. We record. We document every threat, every demand. If we can't beat them with money, we beat them with proof." Her eyes widened. "Go to the police." "Yes," I said, "but not empty-handed. We give them more than a sob story. We give them names, times, recordings. Enough to show this isn't just a debt, it's extortion." Rachel's voice shook. "And if they find out? If they realize what we're doing?" I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. "Then we'll be ready. We'll make them think you're playing along. We'll make them believe you're still under their thumb, and when they step closer, when they think they own you, we'll have the trap waiting." Her breath caught. For the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes other than fear. Hope, fragile, trembling, but alive. "Dad," she whispered, "what if this doesn't work?" "Then at least we go down fighting," I said firmly. "But I'll be damned if I sit by and let them hollow you out piece by piece. They've already taken too much. It's time we take something back." Rachel nodded slowly, wiping at her eyes. "Okay, if you're in, I'm in." I picked up the pen and underlined the last word I had written on the page, confront. The trap was beginning to take shape. Preparation became our new ritual. No more Sunday bread, no more easy laughter in the kitchen. Instead, our evenings were filled with whispered plans, hushed strategies, and the steady scratch of pens across paper. Rachel brought every scrap of information she had, numbers scribbled on napkins, payment slips, even the wrinkled envelope she'd handed over that night I followed her. We spread them across the table like pieces of a puzzle, grim evidence of the web that had trapped her. I bought a small voice recorder. Nothing fancy, just a pocket-sized device you could mistake for a keychain. I showed it to Rachel, pressing the red button so she could hear the click. "Every call, every meeting, every demand," I told her. "We record everything." Her hands trembled as she picked it up. "What if they notice?" "They won't," I said firmly. "And even if they did, they'll assume it's just a phone. But this could be the nail in their coffin." Next came observation. Rachel retraced her steps, describing the buildings, the faces, the routines. I wrote down every detail, street names, landmarks, times she was summoned. We mapped it out on a sheet of paper until the routes became clear patterns. "They like control," Rachel murmured, tracing a line with her finger. "They never let me choose the time. It's always them telling me where and when, and if I'm late..." I stopped her with a look. "You won't be late again. Not because you're scared, because we'll be ready." We rehearsed responses. She'd answer their calls as if nothing had changed. her tone calm, submissive, exactly what they expected. But every word would be captured, stored, ready to be turned against them. Meanwhile, I started building a second plan, a contingency. If recordings weren't enough, if the police didn't move fast, then we'd need leverage, proof that they were more than just shadows. I borrowed binoculars from a neighbor under the excuse of bird watching and staked out the street near the papered window building. For 3 nights in a row, I sat in my car, notebook in hand, logging faces, cars, license plates. The same men came and went, always cautious, always scanning the street before disappearing inside. Rachel hated it. "Dad, if they catch you—" "They won't," I assured her. But even as I said it, I knew the risk was real. By the end of the week, our notepad had grown thick with evidence. Times, dates, names, numbers, recordings. Still, it didn't feel like enough. "They're smart," Rachel whispered one night, clutching her mug like a lifeline. "They'll smell a trap if we're not careful." "Then we'll be smarter," I said. "We won't chase them. We'll make them come to us." That was the heart of it. The trap wouldn't be set in some hidden alley or behind papered windows. It would be set in our home, on our terms, where their arrogance would make them careless. And when they finally reached too far, thinking they still held all the power, we'd be waiting. It was a Thursday night when the phone rang. Not my phone this time, Rachel's. The familiar buzz vibrated across the table where it lay between us, the screen lighting up with that same anonymous string of numbers. Rachel froze. Her hand hovered just above the phone, fingers trembling. Her eyes flicked to me. I gave a small nod, pressing the recorder in my pocket until I felt the reassuring click. On. Ready. Rachel swallowed hard and answered. "Hello." The voice on the other end was the same smooth baritone I'd heard before, calm, deliberate, dripping with menace. "You've been quiet, Rachel." Her knuckles whitened around the phone. I've been waiting for instructions." A pause, then the faint sound of papers shuffling. "You missed a deadline last week. That's 2 strikes. You know what comes after 3. Rachel's voice wavered. I'll make it right." "You will," the man said smoothly. "Because this time it won't be just cash. We need you to move something for us. Tonight." My blood ran cold. I leaned closer, straining to hear. What kind of something?" Rachel asked. The man chuckled. "Don't ask questions. You'll pick up a package at the corner of 5th and Willow, midnight. Deliver it to the address we'll text you after. No mistakes, no delays, and Rachel—" His voice dropped lower, colder. "If you think about skipping, remember, we don't just know where you live. We know where your boy sleeps." Rachel's face crumpled. Her free hand went to her mouth, stifling a sob. "I'll do it," she whispered. "Good girl," the man said. "We'll be watching." The line went dead. Rachel lowered the phone onto the table as though it were something poisonous. Her shoulders shook and tears spilled silently down her cheeks. I pressed the recorder off, my hand steady, even though my heart thundered in my chest. "They want you to run for them again," I said flatly. She nodded, unable to speak. "Then this is it," I continued, my voice steel. "Tonight, we stop playing defense. Tonight, we let them walk into their own trap." Her eyes widened with fear, and I thought with something else. Hope. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual, each second dragging us closer to midnight. 5th and Willow. A package. A threat against Ethan. Rachel sat at the table, her face pale, her hands trembling as she wrapped them around a mug of untouched coffee. I could see the fear in her eyes, but beneath it, something had shifted. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was part of the plan. I placed the recorder on the table between us. "This goes with you," I said. "Every word they say, every threat they make, we capture it. That's our weapon." She nodded, her throat tight. "And if they search me?" "They won't," I said firmly, though a flicker of doubt gnawed at me. "They think they own you. They won't expect you to fight back." I pulled a second device from my pocket, my old phone, rigged to record calls. "Backup," I explained. "If one fails, the other won't." We rehearsed her lines over and over. She would act compliant, submissive, the same frightened daughter they believed they had broken. She would nod, take the package, deliver it. Meanwhile, I would follow at a distance, watching, listening, waiting for the moment we could strike. Rachel's hands shook as she repeated the words. Yes, okay. I understand. I'll do it. Each time she said them, her voice grew steadier, more controlled, until finally she looked at me and whispered, I can do this. I nodded, pride and fear warring inside me. We can do this. Together. At 11:15, we slipped into the night. The streets were quiet, the air sharp with the scent of rain that hadn't yet fallen. I drove a block behind her, headlights off, every nerve in my body alive. As we neared 5th and Willow, I felt it, the weight of what was about to happen. This wasn't just about debt anymore. It wasn't about whispered rumors or secret errands. This was about taking control back from men who had stolen too much already. Rachel pulled to the curb. A figure stepped from the shadows, a small box in his hand. My grip tightened on the wheel. The trap was in motion. The city at midnight is not the same city you see during the day. By daylight, it hides its cracks with traffic and chatter, bright signs and laughter spilling from open doors. But after midnight, the streets turn hollow, the buildings lean in closer, and the shadows stretch long enough to swallow you whole. Rachel pulled up to the corner of 5th and Willow right on time. I hung back, parked half a block away, my headlights off, hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. Every nerve in me screamed that this was wrong, that I shouldn't let her step out, shouldn't let her walk into their world again. But if I stopped her now, we'd lose the chance to capture proof, and without proof the law would treat this as nothing more than late payments and paranoia. A figure stepped out from the shadows, same man as before, thin, wiry, his eyes scanning the street like a hawk. He carried a small box in one hand, plain cardboard sealed with tape, too small for comfort, too heavy with questions. Rachel rolled down her window. The man leaned in, resting an arm on her car door. My stomach tightened at how casual he looked, like handing over threats and chains was just another job. You're late, he said, though she wasn't. His voice carried easily in the still night air. I got here as fast as I could, Rachel replied, her voice soft, obedient. Just like we'd practiced. The man smirked. Good. Let's keep it that way. He shoved the box onto her passenger seat. Deliver this to 312 Harbor Street, back alley, 15 minutes, no excuses. Rachel nodded quickly. Yes. He bent lower, his face close enough to hers that I wanted to leap from the car and tear him away. And Rachel, he added, his tone darkening, if you even think about running, we'll find the boy. You know we will. My blood turned to fire. Rachel whispered, I understand. The man tapped the roof of her car twice, then melted back into the shadows. Rachel's hands trembled on the steering wheel. She sat frozen for a moment, staring at the box as though it were a bomb waiting to go off. From my car, I pressed the recorder button again, making sure every word had been captured. The evidence was growing piece by piece, but so was the danger. Rachel finally started her car and pulled away from the curb. I followed at a distance, my heart hammering with each turn she took. Harbor Street was on the far side of the city, industrial, quiet, the kind of place where police rarely patrolled and secrets were exchanged like currency. As she drove, I kept thinking about what we'd rehearsed. She would take the package, stall if she could, and I would record from the shadows. But what if the plan broke down? What if they searched her? What if they spotted me? For the first time since this all began, I wondered if I was walking my daughter straight into a trap of their making, not mine. Harbor Street was the kind of place that belonged to ghosts. Old warehouses hunched along the road, their windows dark, their walls scarred by graffiti and rust. The air smelled of salt and oil, the distant river lapping against unseen docks. The only light came from a single flickering street lamp, buzzing like it was fighting to stay alive. Rachel's car slowed, her headlights sweeping across the cracked pavement until they landed on a narrow alley. 312 Harbor, the address they'd given her. She stopped, her hands gripping the wheel, her knuckles pale. I pulled up a block away, cutting my engine and sinking lower in my seat. My recorder was running. My heart was too. Rachel opened her door, the sound of it closing echoing far too loud in the empty street. She picked up the small cardboard box from her passenger seat, hugging it to her chest as though it might steady her shaking hands. From the shadows of the alley, 2 men stepped forward. Not the wiry one this time. New faces, broader shoulders, harder eyes. One wore a dark beanie, the other a leather jacket that gleamed faintly under the streetlight. "You're late," the man in the beanie growled. "I came straight here," Rachel said quickly, her voice small. "No delays." The man in the leather jacket snatched the box from her arms and hefted it once, testing the weight. He glanced at his partner, gave a short nod. "Open it," Beanie ordered. Rachel froze. I thought—" "Open it." His voice cut through the night like a blade. Rachel's hands trembled as she reached for the tape. My chest tightened. I hadn't prepared for this. If they forced her to reveal what was inside, if it was contraband, if her fingerprints ended up on evidence. But then, Leather Jacket chuckled. "Relax, we're just making sure you didn't get smart." He ripped the tape open himself, peered inside, and gave another nod. "Looks good." Rachel exhaled, shaky and quiet. Beanie leaned closer, his face inches from hers. "Remember this, Rachel, one mistake, one, and the boy pays for it. You understand me?" Rachel nodded quickly, her eyes wide with terror. "Say it," he demanded. "I understand," she whispered. The men smirked. Leather Jacket tucked the box under his arm. "Good girl, now get out of here. We'll be in touch." Rachel turned, her shoulders stiff, and walked back to her car. The men melted into the shadows, carrying the box with them. I stayed hidden, fists clenched around the recorder in my pocket. Every instinct screamed at me to step out, to drag them into the light, to end it, then and there. But I forced myself to stay still. This wasn't the end game. Not yet. Rachel slid back into her car, slammed the door, and gripped the wheel with both hands. Even from a distance, I could see her chest rising and falling in shallow, panicked breaths. She started the engine, headlights flaring against the darkness, and drove past me without a glance. I pulled out behind her, following at a safe distance, every muscle in my body trembling from the restraint it had taken not to intervene. The trap was working. We had their threats on record. We had proof of their coercion. But as Harbour Street vanished in my rearview mirror, one truth became clear. They were tightening their grip. And if we didn't spring the trap soon, Rachel might not survive another delivery. The drive back felt endless. Rachel kept her eyes fixed on the road, her knuckles white against the steering wheel. I followed a block behind, headlights dimmed, watching her taillights flicker with every turn. The city was quiet, but inside my chest everything was noise, anger, fear, the pounding echo of Beanie's words. The boy pays for it. When we finally pulled into the driveway, Rachel cut her engine and sat there, frozen. I parked beside her and stepped out into the cool night air. She didn't move until I opened her door and whispered, "It's over. For tonight." Inside, the house felt different. The kitchen, once our war room, now seemed smaller, crowded by the weight of what we'd just survived. Rachel sank into a chair, her hands covering her face. For a moment, she didn't speak, didn't even breathe loud enough to hear. Then, in a hoarse whisper, she said, "I can't do that again, Dad. I can't keep being their delivery girl. Every time I walk into those alleys, I feel like I'm walking toward a grave." I set the recorder on the table between us. The red light blinked, proof that every threat, every demand, every word had been captured. I pressed play. The room filled with the collector's voice, smooth, menacing, undeniable. Rachel flinched hearing it again. "That," I said firmly, "is how we end this. They think they own you, but this—" I tapped the recorder. "This makes them vulnerable. We have enough now to go to the police, to make them act." Rachel shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. What if it's not enough? What if they don't take it seriously? What if they warn the wrong person and it gets back to them? I sat across from her, leaning in, my voice steady. Then we tighten the trap. We don't wait for another delivery. We don't give them another chance to push you deeper. We strike first tomorrow. Her eyes widened. Tomorrow? Yes, I said. We go to the police first thing. We bring everything, recordings, notes, times, dates, descriptions, and if they don't listen, we make sure someone higher up does, media, lawyers, whoever it takes. Rachel covered her mouth with her hand, as though holding back a sob. I'm scared. I know, I said, my own voice breaking, but fear means we understand the stakes, and it also means we're still alive to fight. She reached across the table and gripped my hand, her palm clammy but strong. Okay, she whispered. Tomorrow. We sat there in silence, the recorder still blinking between us. For the first time in weeks, the silence didn't feel like defeat. It felt like a storm gathering strength. Tomorrow the trap would close. Morning light crept across the kitchen table, spilling over the notepad, the recorder, the scraps of paper we'd collected. I hadn't slept. Neither had Rachel. We'd spent the night in silence, too drained for more words, too wired to rest. At 8 max a.m., I slid the recorder into my pocket, tucking the backup phone beside it. Rachel gathered the envelopes, the payment slips, the scribbled notes. She moved with the stiff precision of someone holding herself together with threads. You ready? I asked. No, she said honestly. Then, after a beat, but I'm going anyway. We drove in silence. The police station sat like a fortress of red brick and blue trim, its flag snapping in the cold wind. I parked and killed the engine, staring at the doors. My stomach churned. I'd been here once before, years ago, to sign paperwork after a traffic accident. Back then, the building had felt orderly, reliable. Now walking into it felt like walking into court, begging for justice we weren't sure we'd get. Rachel gripped her bag of evidence in her lap, her knuckles pale. What if they don't believe us? She whispered. Then we don't stop, I said firmly. We take it higher, but we give them the chance first. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. Officers moved briskly across the lobby, phones ringing, printers humming. Behind the counter sat a sergeant with tired eyes and a clipboard. Help you? He asked, glancing up. Yes, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. We need to file a report. Extortion. Threats. We have evidence. That got his attention. His pen froze mid-scribble. Evidence? I tapped the recorder in my pocket. Recordings. Names. Numbers. We've got enough to prove this isn't just debt collection. He studied us for a long second, then motioned to a side door. Come with me. We followed him down a hallway into a small interview room. Bare table, 3 chairs, camera in the corner. Rachel set the bag on the table with a thud. I placed the recorder beside it. The sergeant sat across from us, folding his hands. Start from the beginning, he said. Rachel looked at me, her eyes full of fear and exhaustion. I gave her a small nod. She drew in a shaky breath and began to speak. As her words filled the room, I watched the sergeant's expression shift, from polite detachment to focused attention, and then to something sharper. He scribbled notes, leaned forward, asked questions. When I played the recording, the collector's voice slithered through the speakers, filling the sterile room with menace. The sergeant's pen stopped mid-sentence. When the tape clicked off, silence hung heavy in the air. Finally, he said, "This is bigger than I thought." Rachel's hands gripped the edge of the table. "So you'll help?" He leaned back, exhaling slowly. "We'll help, but you both need to understand, these men don't scare easy. If we move too soon, they scatter. If we move too late, they strike first. Timing will be everything." Rachel's breath hitched. I felt my chest tighten. "What do you mean?" I asked. The sergeant met my eyes. "I mean, we don't just take your evidence and file it away. We use it. We draw them out. And when they come for you, because they will, we'll be waiting." Rachel paled. "You want to use me as bait?" The sergeant didn't flinch. I want to use their arrogance against them, but it's your choice. Rachel turned to me, her eyes wide, trembling. Dad. I reached across the table, covering her hand with mine. No matter what happens, we face this together. The sergeant leaned forward. So, do we set the trap? The sergeant's words hung in the air like smoke. Do we set the trap? Rachel's hand trembled under mine. Her eyes darted to the recorder, to the stack of envelopes, then back to the officer. She looked like a cornered animal, torn between fight and flight, desperate for a way out that didn't exist. I can't, she whispered, her voice breaking. I can't let them keep using me, but I don't know if I can face them again, not after last night. The sergeant leaned forward, his tone firm but not unkind. Rachel, they already know where you live. They've already threatened your son. If we don't move soon, they'll keep tightening the noose until there's nothing left. This is our chance to end it. Rachel's tears spilled over, tracing silent lines down her cheeks. And if it goes wrong? The officer didn't hesitate. Then we'll be there. You won't be alone this time. Her gaze shifted to me, pleading. Dad, what do we do? I held her eyes, my chest heavy with the weight of the choice. Every instinct screamed to protect her, to shield her from danger. But I knew the truth. Protecting her now meant stepping into danger, not away from it. If we refused, the collectors would keep bleeding her dry until she had nothing left. And then they'd come for Ethan. I squeezed her hand, my voice steady. We do it, we set the trap. But we do it together. Her lower lip trembled, but she nodded. Slowly, resolutely. The sergeant gave a short nod in return. Good. Here's how it'll work. We'll wire you with a recorder. When they call, you'll agree to another delivery. You'll play along just like before, only this time we'll be nearby. Undercover units, surveillance. They'll think you're alone. They'll think you're still under their thumb. And that's when we'll strike. Rachel's shoulders shook with a nervous breath. And Ethan? We'll put a patrol car on him, the sergeant assured. School, home, everywhere in between. He'll be safe. For the first time in weeks, some of the fear in Rachel's eyes gave way to determination. She sat up straighter, wiped her cheeks and whispered, Then let's do it. I looked at her, my daughter, battered but unbroken, and felt something fierce rise in my chest. Pride, anger, love, a father's vow. The sergeant gathered the evidence into a folder and stood. You're making the right choice. We'll contact you tonight with instructions. As Rachel and I walked out of the station together, the morning sun was brighter than it had any right to be. For the first time, the shadows didn't feel endless. The trap wasn't just ours anymore. It was official. It was real. And soon, it would be sprung. Night fell heavy, as though even the sky knew what was coming. Rachel and I sat together in the kitchen, the clock ticking far too loudly between us. Neither of us touched the food on the table. Every creak of the house felt amplified, every shadow sharper. At 8:00, headlights swept across the window. 2 unmarked cars pulled into the driveway. Plainclothes officers stepped out, ordinary enough to blend into any street, but carrying themselves with the quiet confidence of men and women who'd done this before. The sergeant entered first, a small case in his hand. He set it on the table and flipped it open. Inside was a small recorder, thinner than a pack of cards, with a clip to fasten it under Rachel's clothes. Once it's on, he explained, we'll hear everything. You'll answer as usual, compliant, submissive. Don't improvise unless you have to. We need them to believe nothing has changed. Rachel's hands trembled as she picked it up. I reached across the table, covering her fingers with mine until she steadied. The sergeant nodded to me. We'll have units covering the pickup spot and the drop. Your job is simple. Stay close, but stay out of sight. If they suspect you, the whole operation falls apart. It wasn't easy to hear. I wanted to be beside her every second, to shield her from every threat. But I knew the truth. The best way to protect her tonight was to let her play her part. At 9:15, her phone rang. The number again, that same string of digits etched into my brain. Rachel answered on speaker, her voice calm despite the fear in her eyes. Ready for another job? the smooth baritone asked. Yes, Rachel said softly. Good. Same place as before. 5th and Willow. Midnight. Don't be late. The line went dead. The sergeant gave a sharp nod to his team. Positions. By 11:30 we were back in the car. Rachel drove, her face pale in the glow of the dashboard lights. I followed in another unmarked vehicle, an officer at the wheel beside me. The city was quieter than usual, as though it sensed the trap being laid in its streets. At 11:55, Rachel pulled up to 5th and Willow. My chest tightened as a figure stepped out of the shadows, the same wiry man who had first taken her inside that papered window building. He carried another box. I gripped the seat in front of me, heart pounding. This was it. The trap was closing. The wiry man leaned against Rachel's car window, the box balanced casually in his hand like it weighed nothing. But I knew better. Whatever was inside, it was more than cardboard and tape. It was chains. You're learning, he said, sliding the box through her window. Not late this time. Smart. Rachel nodded, her voice barely audible. Where does it go? He smirked, tapping the roof of her car just like before. Same routine, Harbour Street, but a different alley this time. 410. Back entrance. You've got 20 minutes. Rachel swallowed hard. Okay. The man leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. And Rachel, remember what happens if you slip. From the surveillance van parked 2 blocks away, I knew the sergeant and his team were recording every word. My own recorder was running too, tucked deep in my coat pocket, catching every syllable. Rachel drove off, the box steady on her passenger seat. I followed from a distance, the unmarked cars trailing even further back. The streets blurred past in tense silence, every stoplight a dagger of anticipation. Finally, she turned onto Harbour Street. The warehouses loomed larger this time, their windows dark and unwelcoming. She slowed as she reached 410, a narrow alley choked with shadows. 2 figures stepped out, different men from before, their faces half hidden beneath caps pulled low. One motioned for her to stop. Rachel's hands gripped the steering wheel, her breath coming fast and shallow. I could almost feel her fear through the glass. She rolled down the window, just as we'd rehearsed. I have the package. One of the men reached in and took it, hefting it once. The other leaned down, his eyes sharp. Good. You're proving useful. Maybe we'll keep you around longer than we planned. Rachel forced a nod, her hands trembling in her lap. That was it. The trigger. From the far end of the alley, headlights flared. Doors slammed. Shouts cut through the night. Police, don't move! The 2 men froze. One dropped the box, the other bolted for the darkness, but undercover officers surged forward, pinning them against the wall. Rachel sat frozen in her car, her eyes wide, her body rigid with shock. The trap had sprung. The alley erupted. Red and blue lights spilled across the warehouse walls, washing the bricks in pulsing color. Officers shouted commands, their voices sharp and overlapping. Hands where I can see them! Get down! Now! One of the men dropped to the ground immediately, his hands up, his face pressed into the oil-stained pavement. The other bolted, sprinting deeper into the alley. For a heartbeat, I thought he'd vanish into the shadows, but 2 officers tackled him hard, their bodies slamming into the wet concrete with a thud that echoed. The box lay forgotten near Rachel's car, its tape split, the contents spilling slightly, bundles of cash wrapped in rubber bands. Proof. Hard, undeniable proof. I rushed forward before anyone could stop me, my heart hammering in my chest. Rachel sat frozen behind the wheel, her knuckles white on the steering wheel, her chest heaving. She looked like a statue carved from fear. Rachel! I yanked open her door. It's over. You're okay. Her eyes darted to me, wide and disbelieving. Dad, I thought... Her voice cracked. I thought they were going to kill me. I pulled her out of the car and into my arms. She shook so hard I could feel it in my bones. Behind us, officers cuffed the men, reading them their rights. The wiry one, the one who had first drawn her into this nightmare, sneered through his bloody lip. You think this changes anything? You don't even know who we work for. The words slithered through the night like poison. The sergeant's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He shoved the man into the back of a waiting cruiser instead. I felt Rachel flinch in my arms. "He's right," she whispered. "They're not the only ones. There are more. Higher up." I looked over her head, at the line of patrol cars, at the officers corralling the scene. For a moment, the flashing lights felt like victory. But underneath, I could feel it, the deeper current. The sense that we'd only cut off a hand, not the whole beast. The sergeant approached, his face grim but steady. "We've got them. Enough evidence to tie them to extortion, laundering, trafficking. This will go up the chain. But he's not wrong, and there are others. This was just the local arm." Rachel's hand clutched mine tighter. Her voice was barely a whisper. "So it's not over." I squeezed her hand, steadying my own voice, even though my chest burned with fear and fury. "No, but it's a start." The officers led the men away. The cash was bagged, the box sealed as evidence. The alley emptied slowly, leaving only the hum of engines and the distant sound of radios crackling. I stood there with Rachel, the night air heavy around us, and realized something. Victory didn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it came with exhaustion, with relief, with the fragile knowledge that you'd live to fight another day. And tonight we had. The house had never felt so quiet. No flashing lights, no shouting voices, no boxes full of dirty money. Just walls, shadows, and the hum of the refrigerator. Rachel sat at the kitchen table, still pale, her shoulders hunched like she was trying to make herself smaller. Ethan hovered near the doorway, wide-eyed and restless, his school bag still slung over one shoulder, though he hadn't stepped foot in class that day. I poured 3 cups of coffee, though only mine was touched. Rachel stared into hers as if answers might float to the surface. Ethan sat, cooling by his elbow, untouched, too adult a drink for a boy who had seen too much already. "Are they gone?" Ethan asked finally, his voice small. "For now," I said. Rachel flinched at my choice of words. For now, not forever. She rubbed her temples, her voice hoarse. "The sergeant said it himself. They were just a piece. There are more. And once the others realize these men are gone..." She trailed off, her eyes clouded with dread. Ethan sank into a chair beside her. "Does that mean they'll come back?" Rachel's hand found his, squeezing tight. "Not if I can help it." I sat across from them, watching mother and son cling to each other. My heart ached, torn between pride and anger. Pride that Rachel had faced the darkness, that she had survived the sting. Anger that she had been dragged into it at all, that Ethan had been forced to grow up faster than any boy should. "We don't get to choose what's out there," I said quietly, "but we get to choose how we face it. And tonight, we proved we're not as powerless as they thought." Rachel lifted her eyes to mine, her lips trembling. "I thought you'd hate me for this, for what I did, for dragging you into it." I shook my head. "I could never hate you. I hate what they did to you. I hate that they preyed on your fear. But you're my daughter, Rachel. That doesn't change. Ever." Tears spilled silently down her cheeks. Ethan leaned against her, his small hand clutching hers. For a long while we sat there in the dim kitchen, 3 people bound by blood, bruised but unbroken. The world outside was still dangerous. The storm hadn't passed. But here, in this room, we had something stronger than fear. We had each other. And for tonight, that was enough. The days that followed blurred together. Police reports, meetings with detectives, long hours of waiting by the phone for updates that never seemed to come fast enough. Rachel went through it all with quiet strength, though I could see the toll it took on her. Every time she walked into the station, her shoulders stiffened, her eyes darting to the doors, half expecting one of those men to appear. Every time she signed another statement, her hands trembled just enough to betray the fear she still carried. Ethan stayed close to me. He shadowed me around the house, sat beside me when I read the paper, lingered in the kitchen when I cooked. His laughter came back slowly, like sunlight breaking through clouds, but it came back, and that was something. One night, a week after the sting, I found Rachel sitting on the porch, staring out at the dark street. I eased into the chair beside her. The night air was cool, the kind that carried the smell of damp earth and distant rain. She didn't look at me when she spoke. "Do you think it's really over?" I took a long breath, letting the silence stretch before answering. "Over? No. Men like that don't disappear overnight. They'll regroup. They'll find new names, new faces. But for us?" I turned to her. "For us, it's a new beginning." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. A beginning. We sat there together, the quiet broken only by the distant chirp of crickets. For the first time in months, I felt something stir in my chest. Not victory, not relief. Something quieter. Resilience. "Dad?" she said softly. "Yeah?" "Thank you. For not giving up on me, for setting the trap." I reached over, covering her hand with mine. "You're my daughter. I'd walk through hell itself if it meant pulling you back out." She leaned against me then, her head on my shoulder, just like she had when she was a child. For a moment, the years folded away, and I saw her as she'd been, small, innocent, safe. Ethan appeared in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the porch light. "Mum? Grandpa?" Rachel beckoned him over, and he slipped onto the porch, curling into her other side. 3 generations, bound by love, by scars, by the promise that we'd face whatever came next together. I looked out at the street, dark and quiet, but I didn't feel powerless anymore. The shadows were still out there, yes, but so were we. And we were no longer afraid. The trap had been set. It had sprung. And though the war wasn't over, tonight we had won a battle. And sometimes, that's how survival begins.